everybody who helped, etc. That kind of thing happens. It's, a guitar in the background is one of the most familiar, frequent icons that I see of all wall decorations. So, David, I think you're mainstream there with your music out in front.
Yeah, and I've got the cat, which is another meme device during the pandemic, right?
Oh, geez. I thought that was a lion.
No, my son is in from college from Portland, and so we inherited a grand cat.
Yeah, he looks pretty excited by today's topic.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We are live on Activate NM's YouTube channel. You can subscribe and find that there in the chat box. We'd also love you to have a quick introduction, if you don't mind sending a link to just make sure for those that are new to the space, put your link in there so we can stay connected with you. My name is Dan Herron. I help run the community Activate New Mexico. We're a community of entrepreneurs and world-class mentors, some of those mentors on this call today. So thank you so much for being here. And today is our final session of the year for the Startup Retool series. So we started this up in July as a way to help some businesses think about strategies for their businesses due to the COVID pandemic that's been upon us the entire year. And we are super excited to wrap up the season with a couple guest speakers, and I have the honor of introducing our facilitator today, Mr. TJ Cook. If you don't know Mr. TJ is the founder of Activate New Mexico and the executive director of the ABQID Fund. So if you need startup investment, he's a great place to start, and here in New Mexico and beyond. So TJ, could you give us a quick introduction about the topic and take it away?
Thank you, Dan, and thanks to Activate New Mexico for hosting. As Dan mentioned, I'm a fund manager for Seed Fund, ABQID Fund, and really happy to be and fortunate to be in the position of meeting startups every day, working with investors every day to make the great state of New Mexico a great state for entrepreneurship and investment. So the topic today is actually really great because thinking about buying and selling your business, I think, is really important for a couple of reasons. One, as we heard in the past session, you can look at activatenm.com. We heard from Barbara Klein, and the one thing I pulled out of that discussion was that if you prepare your business to sell, if you do take the steps that make you a great business that could be acquirable, you make your business better that day. You make your business better for the foreseeable future, whether or not you end up selling it. Similarly, with this topic we're going to get into, like, when is it time? Let's say we have done some cool things that prepare us for selling. Once we get there and somebody expresses interest, I feel like there's another opportunity I want to pursue, and therefore I want to do something with the business I currently have. All of that is where we're going to land and have some wisdom on how to go about that. We are going to dive in via two different perspectives. One is from Kevin McDonald, very well-experienced investment banker, whose partner is with us on the call, Michael Lehner. Together, they've been doing this work of helping businesses be bought and sold as McDonald Lehner. And we're going to hear from Kevin about we're going to start off with one really great story of what this world of brokering purchases between business seller and acquirer is actually like, and pull out some key thoughts from that. And then we're going to hear from Alonzo Indacochea, who's in the Activate NM community, and really got here because he recently went through an acquisition that now has him thinking and acting about his next startup, Jogo. So we're going to hear about that startup a little bit, but actually go into the story of what it was like, I guess a little over a year ago, if not a little sooner, still ongoing type thing of having sold essentially a significant part his company and get into that perspective from the entrepreneur perspective when it's still nice and fresh. So with no further ado, we're going to start with Kevin. We're going to hear from him for about 10 minutes or so. Then we're going to go to Alonzo, 10 minutes or so. That's the goal. And that will allow us to then have a discussion. Sometimes the questions that come up from this are the most helpful for everybody and for the audience that's viewing now or later. So Kevin, I'm going to hand it over to you. Introduce yourself a little bit, and let's talk about that big story that we were discussing just beforehand as a good doorway into this world of M&A and what it means for founders.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be here with everyone. Hi, I hope you're doing well. It's snowing outside here, cats and dogs. Beautiful day to be inside in a Zoom meeting. I know most of you in the meeting, and those whom I don't know, I just sent a LinkedIn request, connection request to, so we'll get to know each other going forward. Michael and I are business partners. We've been working together since 1986. The last 25 years of which have been all about investment banking. We've sold nearly 40 companies now in 10 countries in a wide variety of sectors. Michael's in Boston and New Hampshire. I was in Boston, moved here just over 6 years ago. And we'd historically done most of our M&A work in Latin America. This year we have sold 2 companies in Albuquerque. David King was in on one of them with us. That was a wonderful experience. We just sold another one in November. So looks like I'm here to stay, and good we're finally getting to know each other, those who don't know me yet. Mike and I got started doing this by accident. We set out to acquire internet service providers in Latin America. Before we could raise the money, we got a call from someone who wanted to buy them from us. We didn't even own them yet. And so we said, why don't we get in the middle of this? Became investment bankers that afternoon. And one thing led to another. And it's been a tremendous learning experience. And now I think we have a couple of things to pass on to anybody who's interested in this field. What might be useful is, as TJ suggested, is take a look at a case study, something we did 5 years ago, 5,000 miles away. So there's no controversy about who's in the story, just to give you perspective on us. And then I'll come back to the question about when to sell your business and make just a few general comments. And I encourage Michael to jump in because he was there on all this. And anybody with a question anytime, just fire away. So, case study is hang on. Yeah, here we go. Everybody, are you seeing my screen?
Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Assa Abloy is a publicly listed company in Sweden. It's maybe the world leader in locks, door locks, access control systems, those kind of things. If you look at the lock on your house or on your windows or on your car keys, Assa Abloy is in your life. You don't know it, but they're there. They did an IPO in 1994. That's how they got started. They were a merger of Assa and Assa something and Abloy something. And since then, up to 2016, when we did the transaction with them, their sales grew enormously, as you can see. Employee headcount grew enormously, went from 6 countries to 70. How did they do that? Acquisitions, more than 200 of them. And they were accretive to earnings, so they didn't have to raise capital, which enabled them to do this. This chart shows their sales growth in blue. If you can look closely, the green on the bottom is organic growth. The orange, which jumps up a lot, that's their acquired growth. So they've grown mainly through acquisitions. And there's still a lot of room left. 22% of their sales back then were in emerging markets. It's not much higher now. And that's where almost half of the world's GDP is. So they're a good buyer. They buy a lot and they have a huge appetite and for more, and the economics make sense. Michael and I had a client in Chile that made padlocks, door locks, and big heavy vault doors. Sales are about 15 million. They sold in mom and pop stores, and they had an old factory. Did a little manufacturing in China. Assa Abloy, sorry, that was Assa Abloy. Our client were strong, it's about the same size, but they were strong in big box stores, like the equivalent of Home Depot. A little bit of manufacturing in China. Synergy was shared distribution channels, their mom and pop and our big box. Same products through different channels, we might get more sales. And build a new factory in Chile where their combined volume would justify the investment, and then consolidate what purchasing they would still do in China to get better prices and service. The main impediment was trust. Assa Abloy had tried to acquire Otis 2 years before we were called in, but withdrew after months of haggling over a bunch of issues. And a lingering issue was that of price. The offering price from Assa Abloy is about 7 times EBITDA, and our guys wanted 15. And making it a little worse on our side, the sellers at Otis all had different interests. The board chair, he wasn't getting a salary out of this. He needed to sell his shares. He needed liquidity. The CEO was getting cash. He was way overpaid. He owned the sourcing company in China. Horrible conflict of interest. Welcome to Chile. He was not eager to sell. He had a great deal going. These two guys needed the votes of the sales director, who was like Gumby. He would, or a willow tree. He would just go with whoever pulled him most recently. He just wanted a good job. So we had our work cut out for us on the client side. Well, they brought us in because they couldn't reach an agreement internally, and they couldn't reach an agreement with Assa Abloy. We needed to soften some messages, keep the ball rolling, keep the tempo, be a channel of communication. And second was set up rules and procedures and a schedule. What Michael and I do is create like a pop-up market, like these lunch guys who go around in the food trucks or weekend fairs. We need to create a market that looked completely legitimate, but was there for this one purpose and for a very limited period of time. And we needed to appear to be neutral, even though the sellers were paying us. We had to get the trust of the buyer so they would talk to us and complain and float ideas past us. Real value in an intermediary, and these are some of the reasons why. We had to listen a lot. I'm talking today, but most of what Michael and I do is listen. We had to explain who everybody was on each side of this, and we didn't even allow direct contact at first. The first contact was in a scripted dinner in Chile. Everybody knew what to say, and they got out of it well. So, off to a good start in person. On the price issue, we got perspective from another bidder to make it look, to help establish a market price. And we created a sense of FOMO, so no one wanted to be missing out. We guided both sides, and we encouraged the buyer to make some of the price increase through a working capital adjustment. So it didn't look like a price increase, but it was a transfer of some money, which made the seller keep face, in a sense. Had to build consensus, countless emails, middle of the night, breakdown, suicide M&A hotline kind of stuff. That's, that's half another half part of what we do. Here's some of the key documents. The teaser, 1 page to get everybody excited. NDA, so no one will misuse the info. Info memo, this one was about 40 pages, pretty detailed, so they knew what they were getting. Letter of intent, what's the price, how are you going to pay for it, blah, blah. And then finally, the stock purchase agreement. It took us 2 years to do this. That's normal for us in Latin America. We just completed a deal in Albuquerque here. It took 4.5 months, 20 weeks. That's also more realistic for small US deals. The synergy was achieved. Everybody was happy and lived happily ever after. That is what we do. And I'm going to stop the screen sharing, come back in. Briefly, on to the topic of when to sell your business. First, you might not want to sell your business. Might be a bad idea. It might be the best thing you'll ever have going, and why sell? So we caution people to jump into the selling game. On the other hand, there are businesses that have a window, either because it's a roll-up or it's a cyclical thing. Roll-up category, we got started selling internet service providers. We were selling them like hotcakes in 60 days, but the window closed, and all of a sudden you couldn't sell an ISP anywhere in the world at any price to anybody, maybe to your family, but it just ended. You've probably all seen the same phenomenon with craft breweries here. 10 years ago, boom, everybody wants a craft brewery in the portfolio. Okay, we'll have another and another and another. Okay, now we've got 10, no more. You cannot sell a craft brewery here without a lot of struggle, and the prices weren't what they were. There's the cyclical end of the window situation. Michael and I, 2 years ago, got a price for a company in Peru that makes padlocks and locks, 25 million bucks for the leader in the Peruvian market. Guy said, no, I'm gonna wait. I can do, some things in here. We'll get a better deal. Okay, that opportunity came and went. There's a pandemic, there's a recession. The guy's really regretting it. If the window opens again, he won't get 25 million and it'll be a less friendly process. So the point here is you may have wants and you may have needs and you may have milestones you want to achieve relative to valuation to get it up, but you don't get to decide when is the best time to sell. The market decides. It is out of your control. Nobody knows when that moment is. You know when you've passed it. You can anticipate when you're getting up to it, but you just got to kind of take your guess and just keep in mind it's not really up to you. So there are my opening comments. I hope they're helpful.
Very helpful. A couple of takeaways I wanted to see if they extrapolate from some of the Assa Abloy story. It seemed to me there was a little nugget in there when you brought in the other potential bidder. How often or how much is that important as a principle going into a potential deal, that there be more than one at the table? In your experience,
Wow.
is it sometimes part of it, or essential part of it from the buyer and seller perspective?
TJ, great question. It's crucial. Michael and I just completed the sale of a company in Costa Rica, another one to Assa Abloy. It took the usual 2 years, and it was a real grind. And we had only one buyer in the picture. Why? And here's a little of how investment banking comes about. I was having lunch with the guy. It's a publicly listed company. I should probably watch what I say. And got a very strong indication of where there might be a good acquisition candidate for Assa Abloy. I found it, or we found it, teed it up, and really ethically didn't feel right bringing in a bunch of other competing bidders. And we suffered. And so, our client didn't get all the juice flowing in the right way that we'd like to get. But, it was a constrained situation. The deal we just completed in Albuquerque, started with an unsolicited bid from someone in the same business in another state who's got a small platform here and wanted to consolidate, create economies of scale and so on. We were brought in, we found 2 other bidders. So suddenly there were 3. And we went 2 rounds of bids. And by the time we got to the end, the price had doubled from what the unsolicited bidder had put out there. Whoa. That number, I think, is the answer to the question. You really want to create legitimacy and get your ducks in a row so everybody knows it's audited. They've got documents in a data room. They've got a lawyer, everything. We're in the middle of no place, the place the Comanches and the Apaches avoided because you die when you go to New Mexico. Why do I want to buy a company there? All of a sudden, wow, I got to have this thing. And it was all because we got those other 2 bidders coming in.
Yeah, that's a great one. I asked that because my experience, we're not going to get into, but didn't have that. It was just me and the founder of the company, and we're trying to work something out rather than step back and say, if this is a buy and a sell situation, who else might want to buy? Who else could be the seller for what you want to buy and things like that. Really cool. And I'm just reflecting personally before we head over to Alonzo for a little bit, as the perspective you have of seeing businesses as essentially discrete entities is a really important one. I think for those of us, and I didn't, Kevin, you know this about me, I'm an English and Spanish major. I got into business through it's called the School of Hard Knocks it's a prestigious university. And so I backed my way into this. And so I have this kind of initially a ground understanding of business where it's a thing you get involved in. It's very personal. This understanding that I used to feel was very cold and impersonal of seeing businesses as things to be bought and sold. Now I'm seeing the light that it takes both. You really need to have that passion for whatever you're doing, but you also need to be able to take a step back and say, a business is a thing. They rise, they fall, they get bought, they get sold. How do I build something valuable so that I have optionality as I move forward? And the way you're saying, what other businesses provide these types of locks around 15 million? Or what other types of buyers do this business that would want to acquire a business here for about 15 million? Let's bring them in. That's just a really great plane to be thinking at. So appreciate your perspective. I know we'll get into more conversation, but Alonzo, let's go to you. You have a more recent story, actually less recent because Kevin, you sold that business in Albuquerque just a little while ago, but Alonzo, you recently gone through and can tell us about the founder's perspective. So with no further ado, I want to pass it over to you. Tell us the story.
Sure. So I think probably a fair amount of you guys know a little bit about my background, but just to very briefly touch on that. So I between 2017 and middle of 2019 was the CEO of 11 Online, which is a software consulting and digital marketing company based in Albuquerque. I went to the Deep Dive Coding Bootcamp in 2015, and coming out of that, had a tough time finding employers that knew what the hell to do with us. And so with some of my people in there, we started a consulting business, and we grew it very slowly. In 2017, we actually merged our business with another consulting company locally that was also started by people that went to Deep Dive before us. And it was a lot of chopping wood. And honestly, I'm very, very proud of like all the things we did with the business. I think we built something and we had no right to we had no right to operate in some sense from the standpoint of, we came out of a boot camp and things went really quickly. I think it's a testament to the people, to the founders, but also to the people that worked really hard for us. So we built the business, and in 2019 we had a client. It was one of our best clients who was raising money, like a seed round money, to take their business to the next level in the criminal justice space. So we've been doing work for him for about, I think, 6 months. And he came down to Albuquerque. He's out of Portland, Maine. He came down to Albuquerque. He worked with us in our office. This was in February of 2019. And, came down to see how we worked, and we worked together. And I remember the Sunday before he left, we had breakfast, and he was just like, "Hey, so what would you guys think about coming, and the four of you guys, the four owners of the business, come work for me, and let's build this startup together." And so, it was kind of, at first I was just like, okay, this is crazy. And then we started talking about it more, and what would it look like? And, we actually said no at some point, just kind of flatly said no. And kept talking. He's a good business guy, so kept talking and kept going at it. And finally it came to an agreement of how we would kind of transition over from our consulting business to this startup, which is called Reconnect. So if you want to look it up, I think it's you can look it up, reconnect.io. So when we decided to make the move, at that point, that's when we really started to look at, okay, well, we really want to sell our business, and get some value out of the thing that we had built for the last 4 years. And so that's when I started, and I didn't use a broker or anything like that. That's when I really just started to hit my network and talk to folks. And it's a tough thing because you don't want to make that kind of thing public. And so started talking with some trusted partners, some people I thought might have an interest. Got to a place where we had a fair amount of interest, like 3 or 4 different parties that expressed interest. Got into conversations, the different points with all of them. And then probably a month after I started the process of looking for a buyer, we came to an initial agreement with another consulting company, software consulting company in town called Iterative Consulting. And so the guys from Iterative are guys that I've known for several years. We'd worked together on projects. They were people I trusted. From a values perspective, we were very aligned, and they were very interested because we had some offerings that complemented their offerings really well, and they felt like they could build a little bit more of an integrated business. And also, we had a really good kind of recurring product business in our website maintenance plans, and we had kind of a whole thing constructed, and that was another thing that was very interesting for them. And so it took us a month to get to an initial agreement, and then all the other paperwork got done over the next 2 months. So we went from, we know we're going to need to sell the business, to we sold the business in 3 months really total. And those 3 months were insane. They were really crazy. And I think for me, the 2 priorities during that time, I guess there were several priorities. Obviously, making sure that the agreement with the seller was finalized and everything went smoothly or as smooth as possible. And so, you know, that lawyers got involved and all that stuff, and we had to figure all that stuff out, obviously, but it wasn't too bad. And then, you know, obviously making sure that, you know, the company we were going to, you know, that we had the best deal that we could possibly get on that. And that got really resolved very early. We signed an MOU really early on. So once those pieces were in place, then the next priorities became, number one, our customers. The iterative, we had some other possibilities with other companies, but the reason ultimately we went with iterative is because we trusted them with our customers. And I know that might not be like a super sexy thing to talk about, but our customers were obviously the lifeblood of our business. You know, our customers gave us, the owners, the ability to be in business. And so obviously we really cared about our customers a ton. And if we were going to make this move, we weren't going to just hand them off to people we didn't trust, or we didn't have you know, we didn't feel like could serve their needs. So that was number one. And so handling that transition and talking to some of our big customers about what we were doing, and that, you know, that was priority number one. Priority number two was making sure that the employees that were working for us at the time were taken care of as much as possible. And what I mean by that is, you know, make sure that they were set up for the next opportunity, and do everything that I can to put them in a position to move on to the next opportunity. Some of them iterative ended up hiring, others went other places. But one of the things I'm most proud of with that whole piece is that I think I was able to help everybody find a landing spot, find another place to work, find another place to continue their career, grow their career. And a big piece of that was just networking and just knowing people in the community. You know, I reached out to, for example, Charles Rath at RS21. A couple of our people work there now. And obviously they work there because they're very talented and they're awesome and they're amazing people. But I was really proud of, you know, just being able to facilitate, you know, a lot of those folks being able to kind of move on and make that process a little bit easier. I remember when we talked to our employees about what we were doing, and like there were tears, you know, and it wasn't tears of, I mean, it was just, you know, we had a really tight group. And most of us came from coding boot camps, and most of us really weren't supposed to be there. And so, you know, it was a really tight group and a really tight relationship. And, you know, I'm really proud of the way that all that stuff turned out. And so yeah, it's been a year and a half since. I'm you know, really ecstatic with how it came out. Iterative are awesome, amazing people, highly responsible. They've been great with our customers. So yeah, I'm happy to field any questions, and any other sort of feedback would be great.
Yes, I have a question. What are you drinking right now? I'm just kidding. Thank you for sharing that story, and just like, you know, brass tacks how it went down. I'm reflecting, and I wonder what your reflections have been now that you're, you know, a year and a half out. Kevin talked about timing, and it seems like the timing was not market timing. Like, ooh, the market for services companies with our types of customers is really hot. Let's go out. It was this acqui-hire, if you will, of the four founders into this exciting product-based company opportunity, which I know, because you and I talked, that you, like Brian, who's on the call, services to a product company has been something you've been thinking about and things like that. Yeah. But reflecting back on it, would you have built the business differently, knowing what you know now about how to set it up for sale? Like, again, one thing you shared is that you had an asset in some recurring revenue with maintenance, ongoing maintenance contracts, that it seemed like was a lever in pricing the business to the point that you got happy with it. Like, what's the advice to your former self and everybody else on the call in terms of things that you thought positioned you well, whether you were strategic about it or not, and maybe some things you would have done differently as heading into that moment?
Yeah, I think, you know, certainly one of the things is just focusing more on productizing our business further, right? It had always been a priority for us, right? We did things, and we got a lot of negative feedback, frankly, from people in the community. But we always tried to do things like we always tried to like sell, like, especially when we were just doing websites kind of at the beginning, we tried to sell website packages and, kind of repeatable processes, right? That kind of minimized, you're still getting a custom product, but a lot of it has been sort of productized and made repeatable, which allows us to control our costs. And there's a kind of a process and a workflow and a formula that you can repeat. And so we've always had that on our minds. But we could have productized even more. We could have really, like, especially in some of the stuff we were doing with digital marketing and things like that, being that we were a software development company, we never really got to where we wanted to, and actually building software internally to help us, do some of the things we were doing, right? It was really more services oriented. So I would say that's one thing. I mean, like the reason we were able to, and I've talked to a lot of people about it, and honestly, a lot of people have said, how the hell did you sell your consulting business? Because
who wants to buy
hard.
those things?
Right. And so I think, like a lot of the value we built was we had some really great customers. We had some really, really great customers that respected us, took us seriously, and we worked really hard to build those relationships. And when you acquire, when you're in the position of acquiring a business, or you're acquiring, customers or clients from another business, that you don't pay for those. You can't pay for that, like, relationship. You can't buy that relationship, but you can buy the opportunity to build a relationship with a really great customer.
Yeah.
So I think that was a key piece. And I built a relationship with the guys at Iterative.
Right.
We there was a mutual admiration and appreciation there for a long time. And we would even do things we did kind of together, kind of learning, seminars and things like that for our employees and stuff. So
that's that's a good meta observation. You've been giving back from the beginning to the community, to New Mexico, talking to other deep dive cohorts, in the same way that caused you and I to meet in the first place when I was at Cod Labs and talked about what we were doing, right? And so that networking, that proactivity of, believing the ecosystem in which you live and growing and planting, that is a network. There's a networking discipline here that naturally, even if it's not intentional, but naturally gives you those outreach conversations. And I'll say the same of Kevin. I don't think I've seen anybody who's better at networking than Kevin, coming in 6 years ago, and then starting Entrepreneurs Club and having 100 people gather at different houses every quarter. He saw a need. He has this, I'd love to peek inside the brain for his mental Rolodex and how it works, because every time I talk to him, it's like, you should talk to this person and then that person and that person. But seems like a great role for an investment banker to know people who might be interested in these different things and keep those relationships for them. So I think networking is also a really good takeaway from what I've seen from both of you. I got one more question, Alonzo, and then maybe if there's repartee, Kevin asking Alonzo questions, kind of posthumously to a cell in which you were not involved, but other questions you might have for Alonzo looking back. But my question for you, Alonzo, is, and I know in New Mexico we have lots of services businesses. You mentioned having a good result in terms of the value you got in the sell. How did you go about pricing? Did you do a multiple of EBITDA? Because that I find that that's also a sticking point, right? In the Asa Abloy story, Kevin talked about, oh, I got 7x in my mind, I got 15x here. I'm going to base it off revenue. I'm going to base it off profit. So how did that work out, and how did you do that? What does the math look like?
So the arrangement was some cash, but not very much. But it was a revenue share agreement that we have, and it's still in place. And it will be in place, I think, until 2023. And so that really actually helped us get around some of this stuff. Because yeah, I think you're right. Like, yeah, pricing and valuing. And the other thing is, I don't think I would have ever gone for a cash deal anyway, because I think with a cash deal, with this revenue share deal, I think we were incentivized to make the transition as smooth as possible. And I think it worked a lot better for our customers. Right. Okay. And and the reality is, like, we're financially incentivized to to do it. In other words, we're going to see a percentage. So for me, like, I just don't know how a cash deal would have worked out for our customers. And again, that's, I think, a values thing, but also, like, it's a priorities thing. Like, I think you're absolutely right. You can build a business and then you can sell it and walk away and never think about it again. That wasn't really our priority. Like, we live here, we're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to burn any kind of bridges with anybody that really helped us get off the ground. And
you're happy with it wasn't cash, but it was some percentage of future revenues. But
yes.
How
did we figure that out?
Sorry to be, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, that's good. That's just the back and forth. And we actually structured it in a way where it tapers off over time.
Okay.
And so, I don't know, do you want me to tell you the numbers? I can.
If you're willing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it tails off 5% every year to 2023. And I think we started at 20, but there were actually some customers that were 35.
Kevin could have got you 50. Kevin could have got you 50, Alonzo. Come on.
Yeah, but
no.
but here's the thing, right? Like, it's for me, again, like, I think it's a priority. Like, so what's the value for me, right? The value for me is that we get to see a return on all the things that we built. But also, what does that return mean? Really, that return means, like, now when I can, look at the community, I can, hold my head up high and say, hey, I did everything I could to take care of my customers, many of which were local customers.
Yeah.
And, and for me, like, the value of that is, like, really basically impossible to quantify, kind of as I move forward in my journey.
Well, I think you did, in the way of being willing to. I won't go there. I'm going to stop and actually just take a step back. Thank you for sharing that. And it's totally tongue in cheek, but I do think Kevin probably could have got you more.
So I have a question. I want to interrupt. Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
So thank you guys. And Alonzo, how many of these alternative offers did you progress with? And, like, how far did you get? So I bought one company, and I'm very happy as the buyer that they didn't have any offers other than mine, right? So I see a little bit of tension there between the buyers and the sellers. And you mentioned that, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about the competing offers, or how you played those against each other, and how that part worked. Because, I've heard this story, but every time I hear it, I have different questions, focus on different aspects, and there are other parts that I'm interested in. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, there were three other interested parties. One fell off pretty quickly, but not because they weren't interested, just because they weren't really in a position to do it the way we wanted. And then the other two, we got as far as having multiple meetings, and but we never got to paperwork. Really, when I talked to Iterative, I talked to them, I want to say second. When I talked to them, and it came out of that meeting, and I just felt like, these are going to be the right guys for our customers. And, we're going to work with, I just kind of felt at that point, like, I have a strong feeling we're going to go with these guys, because these guys are going to take care of our customers.
Cool.
So, but you know, like you have to play the field. I mean, I wasn't gonna just be like, okay, here's these guys and that's it. I think you have to hear out what other people are thinking, what they're saying, what kinds of questions they're asking. I think it's crucial.
So, and Brian popped in right at the right time, but I want to open up for everybody. We got Kevin here, we got Alonzo here, we got a good 15 minutes. What did you come to the session wanting to know about? Could be insights from Kevin or Alonzo on your business, where you're at. Question you had about something that they shared. What is everybody curious about?
I have a question about valuation. You know, when do you look at revenue or EBITDA or some derivative of cash flow? Is there a rule of thumb, or does it just depend on industry or the particular company?
What are your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yeah, and Michael, jump in if you're inclined. It really depends on the buyer. And David, we like to believe that everybody ultimately projects cash flow and does a discounted cash flow, because you're at least doing it implicitly. You know, like multiple of EBITDA or of sales or something implies a standard ratio of EBITDA to real cash flow or sales to cash flow, and a certain rate of growth, or some, you know, 2 times sales versus 10 times sales, it reflects something about your expected growth rate. So we like to convert it all into discounted cash flow and just say, okay, we did that part too. And everyone wants to talk about use the shorthand of this industry where the convention is a multiple of this or multiple of that. Okay, we can do it that way too, and we'll get some comparables.
The way I look at it, as Kevin was saying, I always think of all the alternative valuation metrics are proxies for after-tax, risk-adjusted, discounted cash flow, because that's the only thing that matters in the end. That's how the score is kept. And it's important to recognize that, because when you use a proxy for discounted after-tax, risk-adjusted, discounted cash flow, you don't know what are all the assumptions that are going into those proxies. So that is the reason why you really want to have in the front of your head, not in the back, what is that number? And how might, if you're the seller, how might the buyer be thinking about that? Because the buyer is going to be doing that analysis, even if he's talking to you about multiples of EBITDA or something. They're all this proxy, and you need to uncover in the process what are the assumptions underlying why he thinks that proxy should be at 4 times EBITDA rather than 8. Because he might be thinking, it's quite risky, so I need to lower the proxy, which is another way of saying increase the discount rate. And you might be able to change that by pointing out, well, actually, let's say you're a consulting firm and 90% of your revenues come from recurring customers, not 20%. So by thinking through it and understanding how the buyer's thinking about it and how the buyer's implicit, sometimes not explicit assumptions are influencing his proxy, the after-tax cash, risk-adjusted cash flow, you can get the price up, because he's not as familiar with the industry as you are. So even though everyone all talks endlessly about revenues, multiples, EBITDA multiples, even PE ratios for publicly held companies. When we're selling ISPs, there's a tremendous amount of conversation about revenue multiples, or even multiples of just number of points of presence or numbers of subscribers. In the end, both parties are thinking about this topic of the discounted after-tax cash flow. And
That's
you
great,
want
Michael.
you want to tease that out because you don't want an implicit assumption you don't know about to overly affect the price.
That's great. We got a question from, I want to move on to a question for Alonzo from YouTube, which is from Michael. And Alonzo, I suppose you can see that in chat, but I'll just read it for anybody not looking at the chat. Was there any IP there that you transferred as part of your deal that could be leveraged for future products, or did you retain IP? Was there, what went on there in the deal?
Yeah, no, great question, and good to hear from Michael. It's Michael Herrick, right? Yeah, Michael Herrick. Yeah, Michael Herrick was honestly one of the people that when we were building the business, we always like kind of looked at and admired because he had a lot of experience in consulting. Yeah, I mean, so the answer is yes. We have a perpetual license to use it, like the owners, right? And most of the intellectual property really was around like a lot of our website stuff. Remember, I guess I talked a little bit about like how we tried to productize a lot of the website stuff, right? So we built our own sort of custom internal use, like for example, like WordPress themes, or we built our own plugins, and a lot of those kinds of things, little bits of software, to better sort of make repeatable the process of building out these sites. And then towards the end of our run, we built this system of basically like GUI blocks to use in WordPress that we were using for all of our new site builds. So they kind of continued using that. But yeah, so they have that. We have the ability to use that. This wasn't a huge sort of sticking point or anything. We built some things to help us internally, but beyond that, there wasn't much else.
Yeah, you didn't have any product per se in the market, but you did have some repeatable tools that could be productized. And am I hearing that correctly, that they could take and run with that, or you could take and run with that? There's not an exclusive to either party.
Yeah, we have in our arrangement, we have like a perpetual license to use it as much as we want or as long as we want. And again, like this is not the sort of thing that, I mean, it potentially, I guess, with a lot of work could be productized like and sold to like customers, but they needed to have that access to that to be able to do ongoing development on that in order to support a lot of the stuff we built and support our customers.
Yeah. Does anybody have another question? I got another question for Kevin, but want to make sure that our listeners, viewers, participants had a chance to open up their mics.
I would like to ask a question. Thank you all for the information. It's been really helpful. And I just had a question about fielding interest from potential companies that want to acquire. Are they reaching out to you, or are you reaching out to them to find the best partnership or alignment? How does that generally shake out? And I guess it probably depends on the company, but what would your sort of take be on that?
Answer is all the above. It all happens. I mentioned the transaction we just completed here began with an unsolicited offer from the buyer to the seller, and the seller said, I'm going to do this once in my life. I might like somebody on my side who's done it a bunch. Other times, buyers, I mean, we have a couple of buy-side clients who say, go search, this is what we want. But we usually work on the sell side. Often we have a potential seller who says, I'd like to sell for ABC reason. Can you find a buyer? And so it's everything happens. Usually before we engage the seller as a client, we go out and test the waters and find out, is there at least one buyer And are there maybe 2 or 3 who are interested? And if there are, then we come back and say, let's talk about how this process could work. We don't like to disappoint people, so we'd like to take, do that background work. Does that help, Monica?
Yeah, that was helpful. It's just I think I just wanted a little bit more information on what that looks like on your end. So I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
There is an enormous number of unsolicited offers being made all the time across every industry in the United States. There's just a lot of dry powder. There's a lot of private equity firms, a lot of venture firms. And so it is very routine for companies to get unsolicited offers. And one needs to have a sense of proportion about them, because sometimes they're just total bottom fishers and they're not worth, unless the water's running up your own nose, and not worth spending any time on. But it's worth knowing that it is very common for almost any company that has any presence to be getting an unsolicited offer on a random basis. At least an unsolicited offer of interest, not so much offer, but an unsolicited expression of interest, saying, "Yeah, we're looking."
But we also anticipate who would want to buy and who would want to sell and bring them together from scratch. We were walking through some candy stores in Guadalajara, Mexico, and found some great candy there, and thought Mexican Americans would like to eat this stuff, and these guys have a great distribution network in Mexico. So we called a bunch of players, and Hershey was interested and ended up making the acquisition. And we just called both sides on our own and brought them together.
All right, Kevin, I'm really thrilled that through this and the recording that people watch later, people are more aware of the awesome work you and Michael are doing, and more in New Mexico. Thrilled to hear that your last 2 things were here in Albuquerque, which is awesome. Alonzo, thank you for being willing to share your story, get into the weeds of it. I want to kick it back, and thank you for your questions, everybody, and for your participation. Dan, I want to kick it back to you because you've been putting some things in chat I want people to hear about, not least of which is C&M Ingenuity and what we're doing with startups and small businesses as the featured resource provider. So kick it back to you, and let's give Kevin and Alonzo some snaps and claps, everybody. Thank you very much for giving them your time.
Hands, if
Thank you.
I'll do that.
Blades.
Thank you so much, TJ. Thank you so much, Alonzo. Thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you so much, Michael, for all pitching in some wisdom for the growing ecosystem. If you would like to get enjoyed, if you would like to join the Activate community, we do have monthly startup office hours, and I put that in the chat, so feel free to click on that. That's basically where we get together, business founders and world-class mentors here in New Mexico, to talk about these topics in further detail, right? There's both public and private breakout rooms that you can go into and have those kind of conversations, right? We used to do these in person, and now we'll be able to do them virtually with some of the functionality of Zoom. We have done over 9 sessions in this Retool series over the year, and every month we highlight a wonderful organization. If you've been following along, we've highlighted all the ABQ chambers, some companies such as Comcast, as well as some private nonprofit groups like YPA, Young Professionals of Albuquerque. And we hope to do it again in the new year. So if you have ideas for resource providers that are supporting small businesses in New Mexico, we would love to highlight the work that they're doing. Now, with the shameless plug, I want to say for December session, we're going to pitch ourselves a little bit. We are part of C&M Ingenuity, in particular the small business and startups units at C&M Ingenuity. And if you're not familiar with C&M Ingenuity, I did put a link in there for the business unit that Activate New Mexico is part of. And we do amazing work. Activate is just the entrepreneur community component, but we do workforce training in digital marketing, Salesforce. You heard Alonzo refer to high-tech boot camps such as deep dive coding. We have a Fuse makerspace downtown. So I encourage you, if you've got any needs for training or you know a company that needs workforce development, please just let us know. We have info sessions monthly, as well as you can just reach out to TJRI because we're all part of the Ingenuity engine, as we like to call it internally. So thank you so much for the work that Kyle, Lee, and team at Ingenuity are doing to really change the ecosystem in New Mexico, and Activate New Mexico as a brand is happy to be part of that initiative. So in terms of this series, it is coming to a close. Thank you so much for participating today. We will be kicking off a new speaker series in the new year, starting in February. So stay tuned to our website. We have an events calendar, activatenm.com/events. And we will be having some really wonderful speakers. We're still lining it up, so I can't talk too much about it. But we will be having that soon. And I'd like to thank you all again for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and stay online if anyone's got any questions. And other than that, have a really wonderful holiday season. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.